a survey. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar about housing in New York. Again, my name is Chris. I work here in the Office of Graduate Marketing and Admissions Consulting. Prior to my role here, I lived and worked in San Francisco. And before that, I worked in New York in the Office of Residential Life and Housing Services. So I'm pretty familiar with living in high rent cities, with housing in New York generally. I currently live in North Brooklyn and I'm really happy there. And so I'm happy to share about my experience. We also are really excited to have a great group of current students joining us later in the session who will talk through their experiences moving to New York, finding a place to live in New York, and all those fun things. Before we jump into the formal presentation, I'd like to make a land acknowledgement. New York University acknowledges that it is located in ancestral Lenape homelands, and it recognizes the long-standing significance of these lands for Lenape nations past and present. We are also conscious that New York City is the largest urban Native population in the United States. We believe that historical awareness of Indigenous exclusion and erasure is critically important and are committed to working to overcome their effects in our own educational institutions. And here's today's agenda. We'll talk generally about the search process, tools, resources, neighborhoods, factors to consider, all of those things. Then we'll discuss some of the things you need to know in order to secure an apartment, such as working with a broker, using a guarantor, signing a lease. And then finally, we'll spend time hearing from our current NYU students about their experiences. And just a reminder, feel free to ask your questions at any time throughout today's session. As a general disclaimer, the advice that we share throughout is largely based on our own personal experiences. We will be sharing resources that have worked well for us and that are provided on a variety of NYU websites. However, these are not resources that are officially endorsed by or affiliated with NYU. Our goal with today's session is really to provide you with a foundation from which you can begin your search and feel confident navigating the search process. The first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the difference between on-campus and off-campus housing. On-campus housing are residence halls that are either owned or leased by NYU and operated by NYU. These buildings tend to fall within a 30-block radius or so of Washington Square Park, which is the center of our Manhattan campus. And then there are also a few residence halls in Brooklyn. Undergraduate students are guaranteed housing, but that's not the case for graduate students. Graduate on-campus housing spots are awarded via an application process that closed back in May. And there are just very few bed spaces available for graduate students. So don't feel bad if you didn't apply or you didn't get in, there's such few spaces available. There might be a wait list, but they at this point may have closed that wait list completely. But thank you to Yolani who just dropped that chat in the doc if you're looking for some additional on-campus housing information. So for the reasons that it is fairly limited, we are going to spend today talking about off-campus housing, which is apartments outside the NYU housing network. These tend to give you a little bit more flexibility and choice in your living space. And they may or may not be more cost effective than on-campus housing. I think sometimes people assume on-campus housing is cheaper, but that's not always the case. So we're going to spend today talking about off-campus housing. The best place to begin your search is by setting your expectations. And really the most important factor about that is your budget. Consider your source of income during your time as a student. So do you have savings? Are you taking out loans, scholarships? Are you going to be working while you're in school? Do you have family support? And use that as a framework to guide you. Think about how you want to spend time in New York as well. Are you the type of person who likes to spend a lot of time at home? Is your program extremely demanding? Or do you want to seize your time in New York and explore and get out there and be close to restaurants and Broadway shows? So all of those things are going to factor into your budget and force you to think about the type of space that you want or need to support your studies. There are several items to factor into your budget. So utilities, with the exception of water, are often not included in the price of your rent. You're often responsible for paying your gas, electric, and internet bill. And we'll share a resource too about crafting a budget. And then you should also factor in expenses related to the actual move and furnishing of your apartment. There are several companies that can help with moves, and our panel is happy to talk about that, as well as companies for renting furniture or purchasing low-cost furnishings. At the same time you're working through your budget, you should also start to research information about different neighborhoods. Location has one of the biggest impacts on price. NYU's Washington Square campus is located in Greenwich Village, which is one of the more expensive neighborhoods in Manhattan. And as you move further out from that area and into other boroughs and surrounding cities, the price tends to decrease or your money will go a little bit further. This graphic is a recent report from Street Easy highlighting neighborhoods for recent grads. Not exactly that all of you are recent grads, but I think going back to school puts you in the same sort of category. These neighborhoods have some overlap with areas where we often see NYU students. In addition to those listed here, I know there are a number of students who live in Bay Ridge, which is convenient for students who are taking classes on the Brooklyn campus. We also have students who live in New Jersey, as well as parts of Westchester that are just north of New York. And then the next thing you'll want to do is think about how much time you'll spend on campus. Make sure you research where your program has most of their classes because that can vary depending on the program. So you can determine how far you're willing to commute. The most convenient way to travel around New York City is by using public transportation. The bus and subway systems are extremely comprehensive and run 24/7, allowing New Yorkers to get just about anywhere they need to any time of day. There are several subway lines that connect to stations near many NYU buildings. This map shows subway stations close to the Washington Square campus, which is again the main campus, but there are equally as many number of subway stations connecting to the Brooklyn campus, as well as some of the Midtown campuses or class locations. In addition, the city is extremely pedestrian friendly. So I know a lot of people walk or bike as a form of transportation as well. And then members of the NYU community also have access to the NYU shuttle bus, which travels between various locations around the city where NYU buildings are located. I think Google Maps is a great way to map out your potential commute, plug in, neighborhoods to where your classes are or to where campus is. It'll show you different options. It gives you average walk times. It gives you subway options, bus options, and it'll help you start to navigate and figure out if you're not able to do that commute in practice, sort of get a sense via that. And lastly, the thing to consider is the type of neighborhood you'll find desirable. And that's really going to depend on your personal circumstances and what you want your your New York experience to be. Students with families are likely looking for different neighborhood features than students straight out of undergrad. I think that blogs and social media are really great resources for this. Neighborhood the vibe and the feeling and the activities can change from neighborhood to neighborhood. And a lot of neighborhoods have some sort of social media presence that'll give you a sense of what that neighborhood is known for or features of that neighborhood. And then you can determine if that's something that's important to you. Again, using Google Maps, the Street View option can give you a good idea of the type of neighborhood, be able to see what businesses are in the area, which tends to give you a little bit of information in terms of the type of vibe. And then lastly, in terms of thinking about what you really, doing that actual search is thinking through your apartment must-haves, which is going to be a little bit different likely than what you want to have in your apartment. So start big and then narrow down as needed. For example, do you need an elevator for health or family reasons, or would it just be convenient to have? Same with laundry, a dishwasher. For some people, these are easy concessions to make in favor of perhaps location, but for others, they can be real deal breakers. So determine what your non-negotiables are and use that as a foundation for your search, recognizing that that list of non-negotiables may need to be a short one. I think that's something that sometimes surprises people about New York is that dishwashers and laundry and elevators tend to be in short supply depending on your budget. So just keeping that in mind and being flexible with yourself and realizing that it's important that you determine for you what's really important. Finally, there are a number of really effective search tools that can help you combine all of these factors. So pull in budget, location, the non-negotiables into one place so you can start to understand what's really available for you. These tools are really helpful in narrowing down and allow you to factor out or select certain features. So if an elevator is important, you can add that to your search tools or your search filter. Listed here are a few really popular websites for searches. This image here is a screenshot from StreetEasy, which is one of the tools that I use most frequently, based on a really basic search, and it'll show you where, these are the certain apartments that fit the criteria that I entered. But again, it allows you to really filter down based on what you're looking for. And tend to give you the most options. But so StreetEasy, Nooklin, Zillow, and then a few others that are listed as well. And so the next thing, so you've started to narrow down your search, you've done the research, you have an understanding of the types of apartments that are available or your ideal neighborhoods or what you're looking for. And now you start applying for apartments. One big factor in that process is whether or not you'll have a roommate. There are two typical ways to go about doing this. Either you connect with someone who has an available room in their apartment, which means that they've done the heavy lifting of finding a place, or you connect with somebody in advance and you search together. There is an NYU Run Facebook group that can help you find a roommate. It is managed with some inconsistency. So I've heard students taking a long time to get access to that Facebook group, but we'll put the link in the chat just so that you have it. But that is a good resource for searching for and finding roommates. I think word of mouth is really valuable as well if you are looking for a roommate to share with your networks. Like, I'm moving to New York. Do you know anybody who's living there or who's looking for a roommate? If that's something that's important to you, do know that a roommate really helps drive down the cost because you're splitting utilities. You can also be really creative in terms of how you set up your room. So taking a 1-bedroom and turning it into a 2-bedroom can also really save costs. So that's roommates. The next important thing is application materials. So before you even apply for an apartment, you'll need to gather your documents that you'll need to submit. The exact requirements will vary a little bit depending on the department type and the location, but generally speaking, you'll need to provide proof of income, which we'll talk about in a minute, a government ID or a passport. A letter of acceptance is useful, particularly for international students. If you're working on campus or getting a scholarship or fellowship from NYU, a letter of employment from your supervisor indicating that you're getting paid, and your start date, or some sort of scholarship and funding letter are all important or could be very, very useful to have as well. And a reference letter from a previous landlord. Make sure that your paperwork is organized in a PDF file. Save it in a draft in your email so that you can send it out at a moment's notice. And we'll talk about how fast housing moves in just a minute. In terms of the financial requirements, in parts of Manhattan, most landlords will require that you earn annually at least 40 to 50 times the amount of the monthly rent. So if the rent is $1,500 a month, you may need to show about $60,000 in annual income. In outlying areas of Manhattan or in other different boroughs, landlords may require less, but you still may need to show that income requirement. Roommates, sublets also will factor into that. So I know what you're thinking. Look, I'm going to grad school. I'm not going to be making $60,000 a year. And so that's where, so for individuals who do not meet the income requirement or credit requirements, a guarantor might be a solution. So a guarantor, or also known as a cosigner, is someone who's willing to take the financial liability for your lease if you're unable or unwilling to fulfill it. The guarantor is not generally required to pay anything, but they are responsible for you in terms of the lease. If you're sharing an apartment, you need to get a guarantor for the full amount of the lease. So there's some nuance there. And sometimes a guarantor, a combination of a guarantor or an extra security deposit, there's different ways that that can be done, but I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that it may be something that you're required to show. And landlords may ask for 3 or more months rent as a security deposit if you do not have a guarantor who is employed in the US. And then one final thing around finances, you'll need to have instant access to that money to pay your rent and security deposit if you are accepted. So just making sure that you have at least some of that money liquid and available in a US bank account that you can make available is important. So for those of you who are on this call and hoping to move soon for the start of classes, now is the time to really start applying. As I mentioned, housing moves really quick. And leases are usually signed about 4 to 6 weeks in advance of a move date. And once the apartment is available to lease, it could be a matter of hours before that lease is signed. So it is really important to have your application materials ready so you can submit them the minute you find an apartment that you like. But then don't feel too discouraged if it doesn't work out. Things are competitive, they move fast, and so there'll be more options available. If you're unable to visit New York before classes, you could consider looking into some sort of short-term rental, finding a month-long sublet, for people staying in hotels, while you do that search process. But there are ways that you can search from not being in New York, and we'll talk a little bit about that with the panelists. And the last thing before we do open it up to our panelists is I want to talk a little bit about the NYU off-campus housing website or portal. This is a one-stop resource to help you. Again, you can use this to find roommates, search for listings, get information about the process. This is a fairly new resource for NYU, and so I think it's still developing, but it is a hub and it has a number of different links and resources that are really valuable to you as you're searching. And so we'll be sure to drop that chat in the link as well. So if you haven't found this already, I recommend that you take a look as a place to start. And so with that, I will invite our panelists to turn on their camera. I will stop sharing my screen. And so we can begin the panel portion of our discussion. I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves. But again, a reminder, please feel free to drop those questions into the Q&A box. I'll keep an eye on those. And so I've got a number of questions prepared, but I'll also want to make sure that I'm asking the questions that you are interested in hearing about. So for introductions, I'll ask each of you to talk to us about your name, your school or your program, where you live in New York, your current living situation. So talk a little bit about your building type, if you have roommates, anything like that. And then maybe something that you like about your current living arrangement, or anything you want to share that you think is relevant, and talk a little bit about your commute to campus. Shannon is first on my screen. I know Shannon is right in the midst of a housing search process herself. So I'll have you start, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I graduated with my master's from Gallatin, and I'm currently in an advanced certificate program at Steinhardt in vocal pedagogy. I live in Bushwick right now. I live in a 3-bed with 2 roommates. My roommates are also NYU grad students that I found through the Housing for Graduate Students Facebook group. And something that I really like about my apartment is that it's actually, since it's a townhouse, it's 2 floors. It's essentially a house. It's very spacious. We have multiple bathrooms. We have a full kitchen, a full living room, which is definitely can be a luxury in New York. So that's definitely my favorite part of it.
Thanks, Shannon. Shrusti, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shrishti. I just completed my first year with the School of Professional Studies. I'm doing Human Resource Management. I'm currently living in Hamilton Heights, and I live with one other roommate. I moved with her, so I didn't really go through like a roommate search process, but we're currently living in a 4-floor walk-up, and we have like 2 rooms. And one thing I really like about my apartment right now is we do have a in-unit washer and dryer, which is super convenient, especially when it's cold outside. And then I also like that it's not too far from campus. It's like a 20 to 30 minute commute every day, so which is pretty nice.
Thanks, Shrusti. Vamsi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Vamsi. I attend NYU Tandon and I'm studying my master's in cybersecurity right now. I live in an area called Dyker Heights, which is about an hour away from the Manhattan campus and about 40 minutes away from the Brooklyn campus, which is where I attend school from. Uh, yeah, while Shrishti has a 20-minute commute, mine's almost double. But the trade-off is I have lesser rent. So that's another thing to keep in mind. There's always going to be a time and rent trade-off wherever you stay. I found my roommates on Facebook. In fact, the very same Facebook for which Yulani has shared the link for in the chat. Please do have a look. It is a Brooklyn brownstone that's located in Dyker Heights. I stay with two other roommates. I found my roommate on Facebook, and he found somebody else. He is a friend of his, so now we're all living together. And come next fall, I am looking forward to moving out to another place. So I guess I am also on the same boat as you all. But yeah, it is a fantastic place to live, to explore, and I wish you all the very best in your house hunt.
Thanks, Vamsi and Anthony.
Hi everyone, my name is Anthony. I go to NYU Wagner, which is the School of Public Service here, getting my master's in urban planning. And right now I live in Prospect Heights with my wife and my dog Emmy. It's a 2-bed, 1-bath, 4th floor walk-up. No closets, no dishwasher, but it's pretty good. I really enjoy it. I have no other roommates. Something I like about the arrangement is compared to like previous apartments I've had, I have a guest room now. So I've had a ton of people, come to my place and, be able to visit, from out of state, which is really nice.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. I will say having any space available, even if it's a spare couch, I feel like you get a lot of visitors in New York, which is something that I really love actually about living here. The no closets thing would be tough for me, but we figure it out. That's, I think, the most important thing to take away is that there are so many creative solutions for any sort of living arrangement in New York. And I'm sure there's someone out there who's developed something to solve any sort of unique apartment layout. My next question is to ask you all to talk a little bit in more detail about your specific search process, the tools that you used, what you factored in when you were narrowing down your neighborhood. Were there things that you particularly were looking for, or trends that you noticed? Just talking a little bit more in specific detail about that. And Shannon, since I know you're in the thick of it, I'll have you start this one as well.
I would say StreetEasy is really the gold standard for that. I've been in New York for 6 years actually, and I have lived in Washington Heights. I've lived in Hell's Kitchen. I've also lived in Williamsburg, and I'm now in Bushwick. And now I'm moving in with my partner back to Washington Heights because I really liked it up there. But in terms of the search itself, I would say StreetEasy. Another option is that if there is someone who has an apartment already and they have an empty room coming up, like they need somebody to take over that person's section of the lease, that can be a really good move, especially if you're looking for no fee, or you're using a guarantor. Like if you have these specific requirements, it can be really helpful to look on a Facebook group and move in with someone who already lives there. I did do that actually when I first moved to New York because I was starting my job and I had never, I didn't have pay stubs from it or anything. And so it was a lot easier for me to get a place without a guarantor if I moved in with people who already lived there and were established tenants and could basically vouch for me. So that's also a way to find it. And then in terms of, having all your documents together, that would be the other important piece. So I'm sure they will discuss that even further, but that's also a huge part of the search. I would say when you go to a place to have like a laptop with you. Most of the time they don't ask for anything printed out. But I still always print out all my stuff, staple it, put it in a folder, just in case you have a question about eligibility. You want to make sure that it's a good shot of you to get approved or anything. It's always good to just have everything with you. So those would be my top tips on the search itself, where to find it and how to prepare.
Thanks, Shannon. The note on documents, I want to ask Vamsi to weigh in a little bit as an international student, and if you had different document requirements or what that looks like for you in terms of your specific application materials.
Absolutely. First off, some of the documents that are standard for every single place that you will be applying for is your passport, your I-20, your I-94, which is the document provided to you by the US government, citing when you entered the US. And also, most of the people will ask for a deposit. So when you do come here, keep in mind that deposits are usually about 1 month to 2 months worth of rent. Beyond that, if you do have an SSN, that is definitely a plus because landlords will be more willing to negotiate. But if you do not have it, that's okay. Furthermore, and I'd like to stress this point for international students, is that I would highly recommend you to network with seniors at NYU who are looking to leave their houses because A, they are living in a place where the landlord is okay with international students, and B, uh, since there is already an international student living in that space, there's a good chance that you can take over the lease or uh, have network with the landlord who might also have other properties around the area which they may be looking to sublet out to or even sign a new lease out to. If furthermore, there are a lot of cases where landlords look for an American guarantor. So if you do have relatives who are willing to sign as guarantors for you, that is fantastic. In fact, that will put you at the very top of the priority list. But if not, your deposit will likely be on the higher end, about 2 months worth of it. This is just so that the landlord can offset some of that risk that they're taking on.
Great, thanks, Vamsi. Shrishti, do you have anything to add to that, either international student related or just generally?
No, I think they covered it all. I think even when I was looking for apartments, I did what Shannon did. I would take all of my documents to them just in case, like you said earlier, like housing in NYU is that, I mean, NYC is so quick that like you might just get an apartment even when you go to view it, and if you like it, they might probably just ask you to sign it. So I think it's good to have all of your documents. And yeah, majority of the documents that Vamsi mentioned is what they ask of from international students as well.
Thanks. And Anthony, anything to add about your search process, tools, resources?
Yeah, I will say I also use StreetEasy, which is really, really, really big in New York City. Uh, this is my second time moving to New York. The first time I moved was in 2017. I used Facebook and Nooklin, which is still around. Definitely recommend. Just because that's another way to find roommates. But yeah, between StreetEasy, Facebook, Nooklin, those are definitely some good ways to start.
Great, thank you. My next question is around price, because that's a really important factor when determining where to live. So if some would be willing to share how you determined your budget or your experience with narrowing that down. And related, there was a question in the Q&A about neighborhoods. So if you could elaborate a little bit on your individual neighborhoods or your experiences with living in a particular neighborhood. For me, recently I've lived in Williamsburg and now I live in Greenpoint, which are both neighborhoods in Brooklyn. I think Williamsburg is becoming very trendy. Parts of Williamsburg are becoming trendy, but it's really lively. And it's really accessible to a lot of neighborhoods in Manhattan, which is nice. Greenpoint is a little bit quieter. It's the furthest northernmost neighborhood in Brooklyn. It's a little bit quieter. It's a little less accessible. I think that's what makes it a little bit more quiet because there's fewer subway lines going there. But again, really accessible to New York or to NYU's main campus. It takes me about 35, 40 minutes to get to campus from there, but I would say Greenpoint feels really family oriented. There's a lot of families that live there. And so that's my neighborhood vibe. So anyone else can jump in, talking a little bit about price and factoring budgets and also your neighborhood.
I could
Yeah,
talk
I-
a little bit about, oh,
oh,
sorry,
sorry.
do you want to go ahead?
Should just pick someone. Go for it, Shannon.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of budget, you know, it's a little tricky for students because the requirement is 40 times the rent, or 80 times the rent with a guarantor. So that's usually how you would kind of figure out like what is doable for you to qualify for. As a student, I would definitely take a look at, you know, your financial aid package and really consider that into your search. I also think it can help with budget to think about like your must-haves and then like the things that you can totally go without. When I moved to Williamsburg, I did live in a building that had a lot more amenities, and I realized that I didn't really need that. Like I had kind of experienced all sorts of buildings, and I was like, you know what, like I don't need a gym. Like this is a little extra. I don't need to pay for this. And so my place now, I mean, we actually do have a washer dryer in unit. But other than that, we don't have any amenities, but I found that the space was worth it. I was able to save some money because my apartment is like a 10-minute walk to the train, and my commute to campus is like 45 minutes, but I was totally willing to do that. And I just felt like it was worth it for the space, and we were able to get it a little cheaper and get a lot more perks, like having, you know, extra bathrooms, having a huge living room, things like that. I have my own bathroom in the apartment, so I think that's really the best way to figure out budget. And of course, you know, once you do figure out your budget, you'll probably find that living with roommates is probably going to help you stay within that budget as well. And then in terms of neighborhood, I definitely look for a place, you know, where I personally feel safe, also where I feel like there's a lot going on. I love, you know, being around a lot of restaurants. I love being around a lot of coffee shops. I like having accessibility to a laundromat and a supermarket. Laundromat, especially if you don't have a washer dryer, because you will have to take your laundry over there. So keep that in consideration. But those are really the main things that I think about when it comes to the neighborhood. And then obviously my commute. It's always great to know like what trains are around and like how long it will take you. Like I would look up your like any places you want easy access to and see on Google Maps, like how long is that actually going to take me to get where I want to go. But any of the places I live, so Washington Heights, Hell's Kitchen, Bushwick, or Williamsburg, I would highly recommend. I think they're really popular, and I really enjoyed my time on all of them.
Thanks, Shannon. That was super helpful. Appreciate it. Trustee, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I agree. Making a list of what you are looking to get like in the apartment in your area. So for instance, for me, like it is a 4th floor walk-up, but we do have a washer and dryer in unit, and we have several, like we have almost 5 train lines, like commute lines near us, which makes it a lot more convenient for me to like even go to campus or just like go out, like explore in the city as well. So I think making a list of those things helps out a lot in terms of like budget. Yeah, I think Shannon put it really well.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. The next thing I wanted to ask was just anything that was unique or unexpected about your experience finding housing in New York. Anything you think is worth sharing or highlighting for people who might be new to New York and transitioning here for the first time?
Yeah, I'd like to take this question. All right, first off, I'd like to say that in New York, it is not very common to have a washer dryer in the house. So we usually have laundromats outside, which charge about $2 a wash. So when you are searching for a place, look for something that is about a minute or two away, because the load is very heavy. And I speak about that from experience. Second off, while the summer is nice, it's peaceful. The winter, it tends to get very cold. It does snow in New York. I'm sure many of you will know about this. So when you are searching for a place, look for something that is less than 10 minutes walk away from the nearest subway station. Because during the winter, it's going to be hard walking. And furthermore, we also have cases of black ice where the water freezes up on the footpaths, so you might slip and fall. You want to avoid that. And third is, here in New York, we have a free transfer between the bus and the subway. So if you have a bus stop close to your place that has a bus that goes directly to the subway station, you will have to pay only once. So that is pretty good, and you can, well, it certainly helps when you're searching for your house. Now, I also want to add to the question of rent. I think that if you are looking to stay in Brooklyn, $1,000 is a good figure to keep in mind. Rents usually, can either be $200 less or more, but $1,000 is a good figure. And this is a figure for a 3-bedroom house where you'll be sharing with 2 other roommates.
Thanks, Vamsi. Appreciate that. There was a question in the chat about the income requirement and using loans and as supplement documents. Yes, those are things that you can use to show your income, and that's part of your application for those apartments. Will be showing any source of income that you have, and loans would be considered a source of income. I don't know if you still need a cosigner or anything else in addition to that, but it's definitely something to include any sort of funding. So even if it's $1,000 scholarship, it's worth adding as part of that for sure. We are wrapping up all the questions that I have. So please continue to drop questions in as you have them. And in the meantime, I'll ask what is my final question, but I'll keep an eye on the Q&A in case anything else comes in. I wanted to ask you all to share things that you wish you had known before your search. So tips that you have for someone who is starting their search process. And maybe included in this are any moving tips that you have for folks who might be relocating to New York. Anthony, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. This one's a bit more complicated, but I mean, for someone just moving to New York, if at all possible, come to New York before you actually move. That way you can see things in person. I know not everyone has the ability to do so, especially if you're international. But if you're local and you can come to the city beforehand, that is the best way to do it, just because you can get to know the neighborhood better. You can see things in person. You can, have a real estate agent show you different, apartments in different neighborhoods within a single day. So that is super, super important for looking for an apartment, especially the neighborhood part, just because like you're moving to a new area, and like New York City is the kind of place where a neighborhood has one vibe for 4 blocks and then a completely different vibe 4 blocks after that. So it's really good to know where you're going to be moving to. And yeah, I know not everyone has the ability to do that, but if you can, please come visit beforehand.
Christy, do you want to go next? Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because I felt like when I was looking for apartments initially, I was not in the city and not many like people that were showing apartments around were taking me seriously because they would just think that I'm inquiring, but I'm not as interested as I was. So I think that is one of the main things. I think another thing would be keeping in mind how much you want to commute. I think from looking at someone that's moving to New York, a 40 to 45-minute commute might seem like a lot, but I feel like all of us pretty much do that, and everyone in New York does that. So I think keeping that in mind, that it's not as long as it sounds, and it's pretty much very normal. And yeah, that would be my tip.
Thanks, Christy. Vamsi, and then Shannon will end with you.
I would say my top 2 tips. The first one would be when you go to a place and you're trying to make like a split-second decision, like something you can think about is like, okay, what's my typical day look like here? Like when I wake up, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get coffee? How long is it going to be for me to walk to the train? When I'm coming home at night, what is that route going to look like? If I want to get dinner somewhere, where am I going to go to get dinner? I think just kind of running through those things in your head is like a good way to kind of picture yourself there. And then my second thing would be to just, there's kind of like a lot of stigma around looking in the city, like, oh, it's so hard, but there is kind of like a magic here, like everybody ends up finding a place. There is new inventory every single day. Like if you set an alert on your phone for Street Easy, it's going to be like 7 new homes every hour. Like it's really a lot. So if you just keep your options open and you say like, hey, I could do a 4th Pro walk up, or you say like, there's a laundromat across the street. Let's say it's okay to not have laundry. If you're a little open, you will find a place, and it probably will not take very long.
Thanks, Shannon. That's the positive energy we needed. Vamsi, there's a question in the chat. So first, Vamsi, if you want to share your thoughts, and then I'll open it up to that question about furnished apartments versus unfurnished apartments and stuff like that. So Vamsi, anything to share, tips, suggestions?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. First off, obviously, unfurnished apartments would be cheaper. Sorry, furnished apartments would be cheaper. Did I say that right? Hold on. Sorry, unfurnished apartments would be cheaper. Yes. Furthermore, you can also buy furniture and other necessary items secondhand off of the previous tenants from the Facebook Marketplace, or also oftentimes there are people who give it away for free. So if you find someone, you can definitely look into it. And second off, you know, as soon as you get your .nyu.edu email, Amazon Prime is free for the first 6 months. So when you move in, you can get all your things delivered for free. So I wouldn't recommend you to purchase something and then look for a car to move it in. You can get it delivered into your house directly. Yeah, I would also like to add that yeah, do look for a place where the supermarkets are a little more convenient, because it's gonna be a little difficult carrying about 10 kgs of items all the way from the subway station to your place.
Thanks, Vamsi. Those are great tips. And just to add on to that, I echo ordering things. It's really easy and quick to get things delivered. I don't think, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend having a car unless you had additional reasons for having one. I have kids, and so it's really easy or convenient for me to have a car for that reason. But I lived in New York for 10 years without a car. And I think that the way that people get around that is either taking an Uber. There's plenty of services you can find on TaskRabbit, or I'm sure just moving companies that you can hire by the hour to transport furniture. For example, if you find something on Facebook Marketplace, which there is no shortage of furniture on Facebook Marketplace, using that to transport goods. The number of large bulk items of furniture that I've carried down sidewalks is a high number. But I think that's the other great thing, is that people are constantly moving in and out. And so you can always find furniture that people are just trying to offload, and usually in your neighborhood. So it makes it really easy to do that. So if that was something that you would, you're concerned about, there are cheaper ways to furnish apartments, just by the sheer number of people that are moving and can't take stuff with them and just looking to get rid of it. So I think there are options available for that. There are furniture rental companies that don't have a ton of experience with it, but those are out there in terms of if you're just looking for short term. Honestly, I think sometimes places like IKEA tend to be even cheaper than renting, and then you can sell it when you don't need it anymore. And there are IKEAs in New York. You can take the ferry to them. Although they don't always let you carry everything onto the ferry, so be mindful of that. But there are a ton of different ways about getting furniture and getting things. And with that, those are all my questions. I think we've gotten through all of the questions in the Q&A. So I want to thank all of our participants for being here today. I am going to put up our contact information. So if you need to get in touch with our office, I know that there are a number of prospective students on the call today, which is great. In addition to doing these sorts of housing panels, we also can help connect you with your schools or colleges if you need additional information from their admissions offices. So please feel free to reach out to us. As a reminder, you again will receive an email following today's session with, again, all this information, a link to the recording. So feel free to ask if we have any questions. We wish you all the best of luck. Welcome to New York for those of you who are admitted, and good luck with your move. We are excited to see you here very soon. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.